My husband insisted I was paranoid for suspecting manipulation. But when our child repeated a phrase, "Mommy lies," I realized he had been coaching them against me. I recorded the conversations, and when the judge heard them, his mask of being the perfect father collapsed, leaving him exposed in front of everyone. I knew something was terribly wrong the moment my son flinched when I reached out to fix his collar. It wasn't fear, just a quick, startled pullback, as if he expected me to correct him for something he hadn't done. That tiny movement, so out of character for him, sent a cold ripple through me. He was 10, confident, usually quick with a smile. But that morning he stood stiffly, eyes lowered, waiting for something I didn't understand. "Did I do something?" I asked gently. He shook his head, but the hesitation in his voice didn't match the words. "No, you're fine." Fine. A child shouldn't use that word with their mother like they're managing her emotions. But I didn't push. I simply watched him walk to the door, backpack hanging loosely, shoulders slightly hunched. Something had shifted in him, and I couldn't pretend not to see it. The first signs had been small, so small I almost convinced myself they didn't matter. My husband correcting me in front of our son, for example. It started with harmless things. If I said dinner was at 6, he'd interrupt with, "No, it's 6:30. If I reminded our son about homework, he'd say, "That's not due today," even when it was. He always said it with a calm, patient tone, the kind that made me look forgetful and him look composed. At first I brushed it off. Couples correct each other. Parents get schedules mixed up. But the pattern grew. He corrected me even when he knew I was right. He'd glance at our son afterward, giving him a small nod as if teaching him something. I didn't understand it then. I only felt the sting. One evening while setting the table, I asked our son how school went. He opened his mouth to answer, then paused, long enough for me to notice. His eyes flicked toward the hallway where my husband was walking in. Only when he saw him did he speak. "It was okay," he said quickly. That pause lodged itself in my mind. Children don't pause like that unless they're weighing something. Or someone. I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was tired, overthinking, letting stress twist ordinary moments into something darker. My husband certainly encouraged that idea. Whenever I voiced even the smallest concern, he'd smile and say, "You're being sensitive again." He said it kindly, almost affectionately, as if he were helping me see reason. But the unease kept growing. The bedtime routine, once our calmest part of the day, began to feel strained. My son used to chatter about his day, telling me every detail. Now he chose his words carefully, as if each one had to pass through an invisible filter. When I asked if something was bothering him, he'd shrug and say, "Dad says I shouldn't worry you." That sentence stayed with me long after he fell asleep. My husband started taking him on private talks. Sometimes in the living room with the door half closed. Sometimes on long drives that stretched far longer than necessary. They'd return with matching quiet expressions. My husband calm and satisfied, my son withdrawn and thoughtful. "What do you two talk about?" I asked once, trying to sound casual. My husband smiled. "Just father-son things. You wouldn't understand." My son looked down at his shoes. That was the moment I felt the first real crack inside me. Not a dramatic break, just a quiet shift, like a floorboard loosening underfoot. Still, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were bonding. Maybe I was jealous of their closeness. Maybe I was imagining the tension. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe my family was still whole. But then came the moment that changed everything. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was helping my son clean his room, sorting through school papers and old drawings. He picked up a notebook, flipped through it, then said casually, "Dad says you forget things a lot." I froze. "Who told you that?" He shrugged. "Dad says it's okay. He says he helps you remember." I felt heat rise in my chest, not anger but something deeper. Something like betrayal. "Sweetheart, I don't forget things like that," I said softly. He looked confused, torn between what he knew and what he had been told. Before I could say more, my husband walked in with a laugh. "He's just repeating something silly," he said. "Don't make a big deal out of it." But it was a big deal. It was the first time my son repeated something that didn't sound like him at all. After that, the signs multiplied. My son's hesitation. My husband's corrections. The private talks. The subtle glances between them. The way my husband always seemed calm, almost pleased, when I looked flustered or uncertain. I tried to stay steady. I tried to keep the peace. I tried to believe my home was still safe. Then came the moment that shattered every doubt I had left. It was a quiet evening. My son was sitting on the floor building something with his blocks. I was folding laundry nearby, humming softly. The room felt peaceful, warm, ordinary. Then he said it. "Dad says Mommy lies." The words were spoken gently, almost thoughtfully, as if he were repeating a fact he had accepted without question. I turned slowly. "What did you say?" He looked up at me with innocent eyes. "Dad says you lie sometimes. He says I should tell him if you do." The room seemed to tilt. My breath caught, but I kept my voice steady. Why would he say that? He shrugged again, the same confused shrug he had given me so many times lately. "He says he knows what's true." I felt something inside me collapse. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a door closing softly in a dark hallway. In that moment, every doubt I had tried to silence became undeniable. Every hesitation, every correction, every private talk, it all came together with painful clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't me being sensitive. This wasn't a phase. Something deliberate was happening. And it was happening to my child. I reached for him gently, pulling him close, even as my heart pounded with a fear I had never known. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I simply held him, knowing that nothing in our home was as safe as I once believed. And for the first time I understood, I couldn't ignore the doubt anymore. I held my son close for a long moment, feeling his small frame relax against me, unaware of the storm that had just erupted inside my chest. When he finally pulled away to return to his toys, I stayed seated on the floor, staring at the wall as the weight of his words settled deeper. Mommy lies. That wasn't something a child invented. That was something taught. And once I accepted that, I knew I couldn't ignore anything anymore. That night, after he fell asleep, I stood in the hallway outside his room, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I walked toward the living room where my husband sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. He looked up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Everything okay?" he asked casually. I nodded, though my heart was pounding. "Just tired." He shrugged and returned to his screen. But I watched him, really watched him. The relaxed posture, the calm expression, the way he hummed softly as if he had nothing to hide. It was the same calmness he carried after every private talk with our son. A calmness that now felt rehearsed. Over the next few days I paid closer attention. I lingered in doorways, pretending to tidy up while listening to their conversations. I watched their body language, how my son leaned in when his father spoke, how my husband lowered his voice whenever the topic shifted toward me. And I noticed something else. His tone softened only when he spoke negatively about me. It was subtle, almost gentle, as if he were comforting our son while planting seeds of doubt. One afternoon I stood in the hallway while they talked in the living room. My husband's voice floated through the half-closed door. "Sometimes your mom gets confused," he said softly. "It's not her fault. She just forgets things." My son whispered something I couldn't hear. My husband replied, "That's why you should always tell me if she says something that doesn't sound right. I'll help you understand." My breath caught. I stepped back before he noticed my shadow under the door. My hands trembled as I walked to the kitchen, gripping the counter to steady myself. Hearing it confirmed what I feared, but it also gave me something else. Determination. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat at the dining table with my phone in my hand. I stared at the screen for a long time, wrestling with guilt. Recording them felt wrong. Felt like crossing a line. But what he was doing to our son, quietly shaping his thoughts, twisting his trust, was far worse. I needed the truth. Not guesses. Not suspicions. Proof. My thumb hovered over the record button. I whispered to myself, "This isn't revenge. This is protection." Then I pressed it. The first recording came the next afternoon. I placed my phone behind a stack of books on the shelf before stepping out to fold laundry. My heart raced as I walked away, feeling like I was doing something forbidden. But when I returned later and listened, the guilt was replaced by something sharper. My husband's voice was calm, patient, almost soothing. "If Mom says something that sounds strange, you don't have to believe it right away," he told our son. "Sometimes she gets mixed up." My son asked, "Like when she said the appointment was on Thursday?" "Yes," my husband said gently. "See, she means well but she forgets. That's why you can always come to me." I paused the recording, my hands shaking. I remembered that appointment. I hadn't forgotten anything. He had changed the date without telling me. And now he was using it as an example to make our son doubt me. I listened to the rest, each sentence cutting deeper than the last. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't harsh. He was careful. Guiding. And that made it worse. Over the next week, I recorded more conversations. Each one revealed another layer of manipulation. Sometimes it was subtle, small comments about me being overly emotional or easily confused. Other times it was direct, telling our son to double-check anything I said with him first. Every recording felt like a punch to the heart, but it also brought clarity. I wasn't imagining anything. I wasn't being sensitive. Something deliberate was happening, and now I had proof. The weight of it became too much to carry alone. One morning I visited my friend Claire. She had known me for years, long before marriage and motherhood. She took one look at my face and said, "Sit down. Tell me everything." I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I simply told her what had been happening, my voice steady but heavy. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "This isn't normal," she said gently. "And it's not your fault." Her words felt like a lifeline. For weeks, I had been drowning in doubt, wondering if I was overreacting. Hearing someone else validate my fears gave me strength I didn't know I still had. "Protect yourself," she continued. "And protect your son. If he's doing this now, it won't stop on its own." I nodded, feeling a quiet resolve settle inside me. Claire helped me think through my next steps, not out of anger but out of necessity. She reminded me that manipulation often hides behind a charming smile, and that people like my husband count on others staying silent. When I returned home, I felt different. Not lighter but steadier. I spent the next few days organizing everything. I labeled each recording with the date and time. I wrote down summaries of what was said. I printed transcripts. I gathered small details, changes in behavior, strange comments, moments that didn't make sense until now. I placed everything into a folder. A simple, plain folder that held the truth he never expected me to find. One evening, as I tucked my son into bed, he looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen in weeks. "Mom," he whispered, "are you okay?" I brushed his hair gently. "I will be," I said. And for the first time I believed it. When I walked out of his room, I held the folder against my chest. It wasn't just evidence. It was my voice. My truth. My protection. And I knew exactly where it needed to go next. I held the folder against my chest as I walked into the courthouse, the morning air cool enough to sting my cheeks. The building looked larger than I remembered. Tall columns, wide steps, polished glass doors that reflected a version of me I barely recognized. I wasn't the same woman who once doubted her own instincts. I wasn't the woman who second-guessed every uneasy feeling. I was someone carrying the truth, and that truth felt heavier than the folder in my hands. Inside, the hallway buzzed with quiet whispers. Shoes clicked against the polished floors, echoing in a way that made my heartbeat sound louder than it should. My attorney walked beside me, calm and steady, offering a reassuring nod every few steps. I tried to match her confidence, but my stomach twisted with nerves. My son sat on a bench with a court-appointed counselor, swinging his legs gently, unaware of the weight of the day. When he saw me, he gave a small smile, soft, hesitant, but real. I held on to that smile like a lifeline. Then my husband walked in. He entered the courtroom with the same confidence he wore at home. The easy smile, the relaxed shoulders, the air of a man who believed he had already won. He greeted the bailiff with a friendly nod, shook hands with his attorney, and even gave a small wave to our son. His charm filled the room like a practiced performance. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed him too. He glanced at me briefly, offering a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was the same smile he used whenever he wanted to appear calm and reasonable. The same smile he used when he corrected me in front of our son. The same smile he used when he insisted I was overthinking. Seeing it here in this room made something inside me tighten. Not fear, not anger, but a quiet resolve. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The room settled into a tense stillness. My husband straightened his tie, adopting the posture of a devoted father ready to defend his family. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, the folder resting beside me, my heart beating steadily. His attorney spoke first, painting him as a gentle, patient man who only wanted what was best for our child. He used words like stability, consistency, and supportive environment. My husband nodded along, occasionally glancing at me with a look that said, "See? This is how reasonable people behave." He spoke softly when asked questions, choosing his words with care, emphasizing his dedication as a father. He even managed to sound concerned about my stress levels, suggesting that perhaps I had misunderstood certain situations. I felt my jaw tighten, but I stayed silent. My attorney had warned me not to react, not to let his performance pull me into an emotional trap. So I kept my eyes on the judge, breathing slowly, waiting. When it was our turn, my attorney stood and spoke with a calm clarity that cut through the room. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize anything. She simply stated that we had evidence, recordings that showed a pattern of manipulation directed at our child. My husband's smile faltered for the first time. The judge leaned forward. "You have recordings?" "Yes, Your Honor," my attorney replied. "All obtained legally within the home." A ripple of whispers moved through the courtroom. My husband shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening around the armrest. His attorney whispered something to him, but he didn't respond. My attorney pressed a button on a small speaker. The room fell silent. Then his voice filled the space, calm, patient, deliberate. "Sometimes your mom gets confused. It's not her fault. She just forgets things." My husband's face drained of color. Another clip played. "If mom says something that sounds strange, you don't have to believe it right away. You can always check with me." He swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room. Then the one that had broken me played. "Dad says mommy lies." The words echoed through the courtroom, spoken in my son's small, uncertain voice. A voice that had been guided, shaped, coached. I didn't look at my husband. I didn't need to. I could feel the panic radiating off him. The judge's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing as she listened. The courtroom, once filled with quiet whispers, now held a heavy silence. When the final recording ended, my attorney turned off the speaker and stepped back. The judge looked directly at my husband. "Would you like to explain this?" His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He blinked rapidly, searching for words, for excuses, for anything that could soften what everyone had just heard. His attorney leaned toward him, whispering urgently, but he shook his head, unable to form a coherent response. Finally, he managed, "It's taken out of context." The judge raised an eyebrow. "What context justifies coaching a child to distrust their mother?" He stammered, his practiced calmness slipping away. I was trying to help him understand things. She gets things wrong sometimes." My attorney stood. "Your Honor, we have documentation showing that the examples he used were situations where he changed information without informing her." The judge nodded slowly, her expression stern. "I see." My husband's shoulders sagged. The mask he had worn for so long, the charm, the confidence, the gentle father routine, cracked right there in front of everyone. And once it cracked, it crumbled quickly. His excuses grew weaker. His voice shook. His attorney struggled to salvage the situation, but the truth was too clear, too loud, too undeniable. When the judge delivered her decision, her voice was firm. She ordered protective measures, counseling for our son, and restrictions on my husband's unsupervised time. She emphasized the seriousness of emotional manipulation and the importance of rebuilding trust in a safe environment. I sat there listening, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that the truth had finally been seen. Sorrow that it had come to this. After the hearing, as people began to leave, my son walked toward me with cautious steps. I knelt down and opened my arms. He leaned into me, resting his head on my shoulder. I held him tightly, feeling the weight of the moment settle into something softer. Something like healing. My husband stood across the room, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. The mask was gone. What remained was a man facing the consequences of his own choices. As I walked out of the courthouse with my son's hand in mine, the sunlight felt warmer than it had in months. I wasn't the same woman who had walked in. I wasn't the woman who doubted herself or questioned her instincts. I was someone who had stood up for the truth. Someone who had protected her child. Someone who had found her strength again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole.